Thank you so very much, Amy. That is awesome. Awesome. Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for sticking around for this final brunch. It is really exciting for me to get a chance to be here, to be with so many of you here this morning, and to get a chance to help kind of put a cherry on the top of what's been an amazing week here in Baltimore. Before we go any further, as Amy mentioned, I am the CEO of the Center for Work Ethic Development, and how many people here are No, not too many people familiar with the Center for Work Ethic Development. That's okay. We are, the Center for Work Ethic Development, an organization committed to helping develop foundational workplace skills and help people get work around the country. We partner with more than 750 organizations in around 50 states, 6 countries. I want to give a special shout out to our friends here from Pioneer Tech in Ohio. Congratulations on your award. Great work that they do. It is great to be surrounded by those kinds of folks. What we do at the center is try and help people develop the skills they need in order to be successful both in school and in their careers. And in doing that, we focus a lot on what happens in people's workplaces. What do employers look for? And so for 4 years in a row, we've done studies with an organization called Express Employment. Express Employment is a hiring staffing agency, and what they do is poll their job seekers, the people who are hiring employees around the country. 1,500 of them per year. They ask them a simple question. When you are hiring a brand new employee, what is the most important skill or characteristic you're looking for? For 4 years in a row, they've done the study. For 4 years in a row, the number one answer hasn't changed. The most important thing has always been the most important thing. What's interesting, though, is numbers 2 through 19 kind of vary depending on the year, but also number 20, the least important answer, doesn't change. Coming up on the screen now, what you'll see are 6 different of those 20 choices. What you see there, attitude, education, specific skills, job experience, work ethic, and work history. One of those is what employers have told us for 4 years in a row is the most important skill or characteristic they look for when hiring a new employee. One of them is what they ranked consistently the least important. What I'd like you to do either in your head or on a little notepad or whatever you want to do, I want you to think of what you think is number 1 and what you think is number 20, or the least important, okay? So whatever you think is number 1 and what you think is least important. No pressure, but you have 8 more seconds. We are on a tight schedule here this morning, okay? All right, let's start at the bottom, because that tends to be where I hang out. Anybody have for a guess for what you think employers might think is the number 20, the least important answer? Specific skills. Raise your hand if you also agree specific skills. All right, you've got a lot of good company here. Why specific skills so low? So what's not important about them?
If you've got the right attitude and work ethic, I can train you the way I want you.
If you've got the right attitude and work ethic, I can train you the way I want you to be, right? I can teach you those specific skills. Indeed, which is why employers say it is very low, but not number 20. Sorry. Any other guesses for number 20? Education. Has it been that bad of a week? I wanted to check before we... Because you know there's a lot of educators between you and the exit. I just want you to know that before we go any further. You can make a run for it. Okay, I'll create a distraction. Why do you think education is unimportant?
Because sometimes what they're educated in might not be related to the specific job.
Right, so what you're saying is maybe what they're getting educated in may not be related to the specific job that they're getting. Right, there could be a disconnect there. Anyone else agree employers looking for dumb people? Okay, just a couple of you. All right, any other guesses for number 20? Work history. Who else agrees work history? All right, why is work history not important? I don't care what you did back then, I care what you do now. Exactly. But not number 20. What employers have told us for 4 years in a row, the least important of those answers, number 20 on the list, education. Woo! Give it up. Yes. I'm getting a couple of dagger stares here as I work my way back up to the stage. Now, again, we're not saying that education isn't important. That's not what employers are telling us. What they're telling us is that it's a price of entry. And that oftentimes there's a disconnect, in particular, between what's happening at four-year university and the skills necessary to compete in today's workplace. Now, it's not that education isn't important, but it's the least of those. So what do you suppose then of the 6 remaining ones, of the 5, what do you suppose then is number 20, is number 1, most important that employers are looking for? Attitude, where's my attitude? Okay, we're going to go back real quickly. Okay, just real quick, for those of you who hadn't seen the screen before, the title of today's presentation, okay, next slide, organization I work for. Next slide, first opportunity to get a correct answer, and the answer is? You guys are brilliant! Okay, now, before my attitude people start copying me an attitude, and I see you are already, okay, let's just say this. Attitude is a critical component of work ethic. We're going to talk about what breaks it down. But what employers told us word for word was the most important thing they looked for was the work ethic of a job candidate. Well, that's great. I mean, that's good to know for right now. But here's the problem, right? Technology is rapidly changing, right? The world is rapidly changing. The jobs of today will not be the jobs of tomorrow. In fact, it's estimated that 80% of the jobs that we'll be doing in the year 2030 haven't even been invented yet. Right? Entire industries are going to go away. When you ask futurists what kind of jobs do they predict most likely will go away, the list is stunning. But here's what's awesome. The number 1 job most likely to go away in the future? Telemarketers! Woo! Yeah. Okay, now, but before we get too excited, okay, you'll still be getting the calls, all right? It will just be really smart robots who don't mind hearing no a lot. What I find, though, is interesting is number 2 on that list, accountants and auditors. When we hear technology, right, it's taking away these sort of low-skill, low-paying jobs. The reality is that's not true. Artificial intelligence and automation will take away jobs that can be easily repeated, regardless of whether or not they require high skill or low skill. Right? The reality is we don't know what the future has in store. So how do we prepare our youth today? How do we prepare our students for jobs that don't exist? Well, those same futurists are asked what skills are going to be most important in the future. The number 1 skill they list as the top 10? Work ethic. That's right. Work ethic is the number 1 skill for today, and work ethic will be the number 1 skill in the future. There's only one problem, right? Work ethic is in high demand and in low supply, right? When you look at it, part of the challenge is, right, that we don't even know what we don't know, right? When you ask people very simple questions, what do you mean by work ethic, right? If I asked each one of you what you mean by work ethic, you'd probably come up with millions of different responses. If you were to do an internet search on work ethic, you would find that almost all the stories about work ethic are about athletes who put in extra time at the gym. Look, and that's great. But the reality is in the workplace, employers are looking more for that, right? Because you all know this. You all know the one person you've worked with who's the first person in the door on Monday, right? The last person to leave on Friday, and the least productive person between those 5 days, right? They're putting in all the face time in the world. Oh my God, you wouldn't understand. I spent so much time this weekend grading. Well, maybe if you spent less time talking to me and more time doing your work, you wouldn't have to do as much, right? Right? The reality is what employers aren't looking for is more face time. What they want specifically when mentioned what is it that you're looking for, they want people who show up regularly, right? Who have a good attitude, who are willing to learn, who are do more than the basics, right? When we broke it all down, we say there's 6 things built on attitude that employers are looking for. In addition to a solid attitude, which we already mentioned, right? It's about attendance, appearance, ambition, appreciation, accountability, and acceptance of others. Coincidentally, they all start with the letter A, which is why we remind people to simply bring their A game. Okay, I didn't come up with it. I thought it was really clever. All right? But we tell people that all the time. Work ethic is not one skill. It is a set of 7 skills, and it's how we build those together. But the problem is this, right? Why do we have to teach people these things, right? Why do I have to tell you that 8 o'clock means 8 o'clock and not 8-ish, right? Why? Why do we have to do? Because simply put, common sense is no longer common practice, right? The millennials today, they just don't have the same work ethic we did, right? When you look at charts, people self-select. It's really interesting. They say this, right? Do you believe in the work ethic? Whatever worth doing is worth doing perfectly. Here's what's scary. When you break that down by age cohort, it shows some very dramatic responses, right? Older boomers, you don't have to raise your hand. We know who you are in the room. Okay, older boomers, 74% of you strongly agree with that statement. But every age cohort, you can see, goes down, 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 and down. And now millennials, the largest percentage of our workforce and the majority of our students, less than half of them strongly agree with that statement. Right? You've seen what's been written about this generation, what trouble we're in, right? The me generation. I'll zoom in here real quick. Lazy, entitled narcissists who still live with their parents. Boom, mic drop, right? Right, you know what the millennials are like. It's totally different. Things are so bad. Like, you see what's been written over and over about young people, right? They're privileged, they're narcissistic, they're entitled, they're spoiled. But when you actually get into the research, which is what we do at the center, you notice some very different things appear. What do I mean by this? The quotation you see on the screen right here isn't from that Time magazine article. No, actually, it's from an article in Life magazine in 1968 talking about hippies entering into the workplace. Right? We see these same trends, right? These preening narcissists have to document everything, right? Right? It's like you don't have to take a picture of your food before you eat it, kids. It tastes the same, right? It's funny, our attitudes about you don't change, but the technology does, because that actually comes from Newsweek in 1985. The difference was they weren't complaining about smartphones, they were complaining about shoulder-mounted camcorders, right? A little harder to take with you to the restaurant. The reality is this: when you actually get the research, here's what it shows. As the Journal of Business and Psychology found when they did a meta-study, they combined and averaged the results of 77 different studies, they found this, that there is no statistically significant difference in the work ethic scores of any one of the three generations. However, I do want to point out, as a proud, card-carrying member of the forgotten sandwich generation X, which one has the highest score? That's us, baby! Gen X, number one! Woo! Okay, again, it's 0.03. It's like a rounding error, okay? The reality is we're all about the same. And what's even more entertaining, I find, there's a study that came out about a month ago. Because here's what's interesting, when you start looking at generations, things happen fast. The oldest millennials are now almost 40. The youngest millennials are around 22, 23. That means actually our students and the youngest members of our workforce are this new generation called Generation Z. The reason I find that was interesting is because this was a study done of opinion of millennials about both millennials in the workplace and Generation Z in the workplace. Millennials use words to describe themselves: creative, entrepreneurial, problem solving. What's the number one word do you think millennials use to describe Generation Z? Lazy, right? Right? Lazy was number one. It's amazing how quickly these things happen. So if we know this, work ethic isn't just one thing, it's 7 things. Work ethic is not about generations. It's about societal challenges, because we have people who are 16 dealing and struggling with work ethic issues. We have people we work with who are 60 who are dealing with these issues. The question then becomes, can you teach, can you train work ethic? The answer is yes. Okay, let's try that again. Can you teach or train work ethic? You're like, if not, this is going to be a terrible rest of this presentation, right? Yes, you can. But you can't teach work ethic the way that we have in the past. Traditionally, we've tried to teach work ethic not by teaching people the value of it, but by telling them what not to do, right? You'd better show up here on time tomorrow. If you're not on time, you are going to get fired. Put that phone down. If I have to tell you one more time about those clothes, I am going to send you home, right? And I'm pointing and I'm pointing and I'm poking. That's great, as long as I'm here and I'm pointing. What happens as soon as I turn my back? They're going to do it again, coming in late, talking on their phone, whatever she wants to wear, she's wearing, right? I just hope that Josh isn't there, right? The reality is you can't teach work ethic by pointing fingers at people. Instead, you have to just go back and focus on the famous WIIFM. What's in it for me? When people understand why it matters to them, that intrinsic motivation then drives that long-term behavior shift. Not a short-term behavior change because I'm pointing my finger at you. We have to focus on the what's in it for me, and when you do, it works. Our partners we worked with at Ferris State University. No bulldogs, one bulldog in the house. Woo! All right. Ferris State University did a study. What they found is when they taught adults these basic skills, they increased their job retention scores over 40%. It makes a difference regardless of what age you are. People can develop these skills. But why do we have to? Why do we have to teach people stuff that used to be common sense? Why? Because the places we've been developing work ethic over the past 10, 20, 30, and 40 years have all been going away. For most of you, where would you say you developed your work ethic skills? At home, right? You're sitting at home with your family, you're eating dinner, you're talking about important things, you're doing work around the house. Right? Okay, let's be honest. Nobody's table looks like this, right? Not even for Thanksgiving was mine this nice, right? But the reality is people are spending less and less time at home talking. Why? It's a little thing we call the Twitterization of conversation, right? It started in our office spaces with email, right? I know some of you around this room know that, right? You've got an office right next to someone else's. When you want to do lunch with them, do you go and walk over to their office? Shoot them a quick email. What time do you want to do lunch, right? We do the same thing on our phones. How many of you here have teenagers? All right. Those of you with teenagers, if your teen is in their room and it's time for dinner, how do you get them to come to dinner? You text them, right? I did this presentation a couple weeks ago, and this woman was like, "Oh, I don't text my kids." I was like, "What? You go talk to them?" And she's like, "No, I turn off the Wi-Fi." I was like, now that is a smart woman right there, right? Regardless of what we do, we're spending less and less time talking to our kids. On average, how many hours per week would you say a typical parent spends in meaningful dialogue with their children? Per week. It's not a real optimistic Saturday crowd. All right, we got 1, 5, 4, we're going the wrong way, 6, 7, 8, back to 1. Okay, I see. Well, then you might be surprised the typical parent spends 15 minutes a week in meaningful dialogue with their children. Wow. Now, the problem is this. That's an interesting study that was done as a point in time, but I don't actually have any research to prove that that is impactful on childhood development. I don't think it can be good, but I don't have anything. Fortunately, our good friends at the University of Minnesota, 2, 3 gophers in the room, great. The University of Minnesota did a 25-year study looking at early inputs in childhood development that had the greatest impacts later in life. What they found is the greatest impact later in life was not whether or not your child had lots of money growing up, growing the right zip code, age, gender, race. It was one thing and one thing only. Doing regular chores. And here's the scary part. We took that data point and compared it with this. A study was asking over 1,000 parents, did you have to do regular chores? How many of you had to do regular chores growing up? Yeah, almost all of us, right? I didn't technically have to do chores. I also didn't have to eat dinner. I chose dinner, okay? So yes, I did chores. These same 82% of parents were asked, do you make your children do regular chores? Only 28% said yes. That seismic shift in a single generation is having a huge impact on the development of these skills at home. Because again, what the University of Minnesota found was that the best indicator of future interpersonal and workplace success was doing regular chores. And yes, those of you who have children, feel free to take a picture of the slide and text it to them. Wow. So, what does that mean? If it's not happening at home, whose responsibility is it then to teach these very important skills? Teachers, right? It's our responsibility, because when we think about what we're tasked with, right? What are we focused on? Helping to develop long-term success. For most of us, the reality is our school environment has been shaped for the last 20 plus years by the No Child Left Behind Act. Right? I'm not going to get political here, right? But unintended consequences. We focused on school accountability. How do we measure school accountability? Test scores. And so what do we focus on? Testing. The scary part is when you look nationwide, the average student has had to take over 100 high-stakes tests before they graduate. Your sophomore year is your worst with 10.5 on average. But what's scarier to me is that in preschool, on average, a preschooler takes 4 high-stakes tests already to start off their educational experience. Well, when you got all this emphasis on testing, you also have another thing that's happening at the same time. And that's this. Okay, for those of you in the back of the room, you're like, Josh, that is a terrible slide. It's so bad, I can't read it from back here. Those of you in the front of the room are like, Josh, that is a terrible slide. I can't read it from up here either. So let me just tell you what that slide is. This slide is per pupil spending on secondary education in America over the last 7 years. All the states in red are states with declines in spending. led by our good friends in Oklahoma, who have lost almost 24% per pupil. The sad part is even the states in blue have had very small increases, with the exception of our bottom state there, North Dakota. And I will tell you right now, all 8 of those kids are getting a phenomenal education, okay? They are crushing it in North Dakota. Okay, now before I get any hate emails, there are more than 8 kids in North Dakota. I know that. We work with them. The reason why North Dakota has gone up so much is because theirs was tied to the discovery of oil and gas in western North Dakota, which totally shifted their state budget. But for most of us, we're seeing a decline in resources at the same time this emphasis in testing. So what happens then? Some classes have to go. We just don't have the resource to offer as many as we used to. So what types of classes typically do we not offer in American high schools? Arts, music, right? Let's look at the numbers. Since 1990, what have you seen? Fine arts actually haven't gone down. They've plateaued. Only one type of class has seen a significant decline over the last 28 years. Career technical education. Regardless of whether or not that's shop, whether or not that's DECA, whether or not that's family and consumer science, do not call it home ec, all right? All right? Family and consumer science. Regardless of where it is, those were the skills, those were the places where we learned these skills, right? Those were the classes we developed this behavior. And those are the ones that are going away. That's why career and tech academies like Pioneer are so critical. But we've got to be able to open up those experiences to students of all experiences. Why? Because what we find is we're simply not developing them there. So if they're not at school, they're not at home, where did most of us then have to develop these skills? On the job, right? Early employment. How many of you had a job before you were 20? How many people? Just look around there. See how many people had jobs before 20. That's a lot of people. How many of you had an awesome first job? Okay, a handful of folks had awesome first jobs. What was yours?
I cleaned out stables. I shoveled poo.
You shoveled poo. I don't want to know why you think that was an awesome first job. I will let that one, I'm just going to leave you and your psychologist for that one. What was your awesome first job?
I worked at Chick-fil-A.
Worked at Chick-fil-A. Sundays off, baby. And when you're a teen, that is especially important. All right. Awesome first job? Crappy first job. How many had a bad first job? What was your bad first job? A waitress. What was your bad first job? Apparently not shoveling poop, right? I grew up in a small town in Nebraska before I went to high school. 350 people in my town, so that means you worked 2 places, the Dairy Queen or you detasseled corn, okay? If you've never detasseled corn, my advice, don't, okay? It's just like every one of those other ag jobs. It will destroy your hands, right? It is just a terrible place, right? Regardless whether or not you had a great first job or a bad first job, the lessons you learned on those early jobs probably stay with you today, right? Whether or not that is, I don't want to shovel horse poop my whole life, or how I have to deal with difficult people, or managing stress, or time, or money, right? The problem is this. Almost everybody in this room had a job before you were 20, and that's no longer the norm. The Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates that between 1948 and about the year 2000, an average number of about 50 to 60% of kids 16 to 19 out of school were employed. The problem is, since the year 2000, that number has been steadily falling. Exacerbated by the Great Recession of 2007, 2008, we are now seeing youth employment of youth who are out of school, 16 to 19, at around 30 to 35%. The scarier part is that number is projected by 2024 to be at 25%, meaning only 1 out of every 4 out-of-school youth between 16 and 19 will be working. What's even scarier for summer jobs, right, where the people who are in school oftentimes have some sort of employment. That number hit its peak in the late 70s at around 75%, and it's been declining over the last 40 years. Now fewer than 45% of young people have a summer job. So let me ask you this question. Why are young people not working? Why do kids not have jobs the way they used to? Parents give them money, right? It's because you boomers aren't retiring. You won't let us take your simple jobs at Starbucks, right? I hear all sorts of different things, right? It's minimum wage, it's labor laws. It's, right? When you look at the data, here's what it shows you. Since 1994, you can see the number of disengaged youth has more than doubled from about 600,000 over 1.2 million. What you'll also notice in that graph is that red line at the bottom. The red line at the bottom is the number of youth who are looking for work and cannot find it. What do you notice about that red line? It stays the same and it's very flat. The reason why that blue line goes up is the yellowish green one right below it. And what is it? I don't want a job. Young people today aren't working in America not because they cannot find work. They're not working because they don't want to, and nobody's making them. So, recap. Families falling apart. Schools focused on other things. No one's working. Great. So who's teaching us about work ethic? Pop culture and mass media. And how's that working out for you? All right? Have you guys seen this ad lately on TV? No. This ad was paid for by the U.S. government in the 1920s, even before it was on TV, right? Now if you watch ads on TV, in particular on daytime TV, right? When most people aren't working, watch TV, you see ads for two types of things. Number one type of thing? Pharmaceuticals, right? Some sort of pill that will solve all of your problems, minus the 20 seconds of side effects, right? Many of which seem worse than whatever it was you had in the first place. But the second ad you see almost exclusively on daytime TV is for what? Injury lawyers. What's an injury lawyer going to do for you? Get you money for learning what important skill? For taking the pill that you saw advertised right before that. Right? It's like your path to success is not about getting skilled. It's not about getting an education. It's about getting T-boned by a semi. And the strong arm got me 1.2 million, right? What's the most popular type of TV show on TV today? Reality TV. What skills do you need to be successful as a real housewife? Yeah, nail polish and drama. How many of you, right, in an interview with them, they're like, you know what we're really missing here at the office? We're missing someone who's really good at nail polish and has a lot of drama. Do you think you could bring that to our company? Yeah, excellent. You are hired, right? No one's ever going to say that, right? It's almost as if work is seen as more of a stigma than something to be celebrated. So it's no surprise when we talk about what it's like to give it your all at work, we have very different opinions. I saw this sign the other day I thought it was awesome. It's about giving 100% at work, and I think it's so appropriate. Lord only knows where Saturday is on that list. So let's face it, we are in a crisis as it relates to work ethic, not because there's something unique about this new generation, but because the pillars we've developed these skills over the past have been eroding for 10, 20, 30, and 40 years, and it is having a huge impact on us. One of the biggest places we see this impact of work ethic, not too surprisingly, is in our academic world. Students, I know this may be difficult to believe, but here's a study. Students who have high levels of work ethic graduate at higher rates. I know, I'm like, who paid money for that study? Right? But here's the great news. People who are in the upper quartile, almost 100% of them graduate from high school. But where we also see this huge impact is when they graduate and then move into the career world. All right, we're at a really interesting time in America right now. We have right now 3.7% unemployment. What does that mean? For the 12th month in a row now, we have more open jobs than we have people who are looking for work. There right now are over 6.6 million open jobs in America, fewer than 6 million people looking for work. But that number is slightly distorted because here's the problem. What we're finding in more and more communities is that people have stopped looking for work because they say they don't have the skills necessary. So when you see these numbers, it's actually precipitated by this lack of what we call labor force participation. Right now, only 62.9% of Americans who are eligible to work are actually looking for work. That means over 33% of the workforce is sitting on the sidelines because they don't have the skills necessary. They're just unskilled. This skills gap is causing a huge problem with employers because they can't find the people they're looking for. So when you ask employers, tell us about the skills gap. What skills are you missing the most? It wasn't technology. It wasn't technical skills. The skills they were missing more than anything else were basic soft skills. Right? To the point where it said, hey, why do employers not want specific skills? I will tell you this, when I talk to employers around the country, and I do, they tell me almost exactly the same thing every single time. They say this, Josh, I don't care where you are. Could you send me a graduate who can A, show up to work every day on time, B, follow basic instructions, and C, piss a clean drug test, and I will hire every kid you can send me, right? That's all they want. Somebody shows up, right? We'll follow basic instructions and it could be drug-free. That's the skill gap. And the problem is we just aren't addressing it. Because the problem is this, employers eventually do get so desperate they will hire some of those people. And what happens when you hire somebody who has bad work ethic? They don't last long, right? Right now, more and more employers are saying that they are looking for people with a solid soft skill background. In fact, 93% of all employers say that they are looking for soft skills that they think those are more important or as important. That means only 7% of hiring managers around the country think that soft skills are unimportant. Look, I'm not saying that 7% of people are stupid, but 7% of Americans also believe that chocolate milk comes from brown cows, okay? I'm just saying there's a coincidence that they're both 7%. When you go back and look at it, most people who get fired, you ask them why? Why? Because the bad hire had lacks of soft skills. That's why people get fired. Forbes magazine did a study with 20,000 newly hired employees, tracked them for a year and a half, found out the ones who were fired, only 11% of the time, it was because of a lack of technical skill. 89%, it was because of lack of attitude and soft skills. Think about this. How many of you have ever worked with somebody who is bad at their job? Anybody? Okay, stop pointing at the people at your table. That's not nice, okay? That's not nice. Many of us have worked with somebody who's not good. How many of you worked with somebody who's not good at their job and they got fired simply because they were not good at their job? Right? More often than not, they're not. Right? If you've got somebody who is mediocre at their job, but they show up every day, all of their coworkers like them, and they're willing to pitch in and help out when asked, how long can that mediocre person keep a job? Forever, right? They plan the Christmas party, December's employee of the month, right? That's what we're talking about here. That's how desperate people are, right? But the problem is this. We can't live in a fantasy world where we think that soft skills are the only thing that's important. The reality is soft skills are critical, but they're one part of the triumvirate that make people successful, along with technical skills and academic skills. Right? If you get rid of somebody who has soft skills and they only have technical skills and academic skills, then they end up with somebody who has high potential. Because that's what every employer says about them when they get fired, right? Oh, you have so much potential. Oh, you've got so much potential, right? But if we go and we focus not on technical skills, but just academic and soft skills, what do we end up with? Nice people. She's such a nice person. I'm not going to hire her, though, right? She can't do the job. If we hire people who only have technical skills and work ethic but no academic skills, those are the bulls. They'll charge in, they'll get everything done, but they'll burn through everyone's resources. If you want to make someone successful, and what we have to be thinking about is how do we combine all three of them, because when you do that, that's when we get someone who is truly career ready. Harvard University studied this for over 100 years. Stanford's backed up their research and they find this is true. 85% of your long-term success comes from developing those foundational soft skills. But without the top 15%, you'll never get your foot in the door. We have to balance all of these things out. So for the rest of the time that we have here this morning, what I want to do is I want to talk to you about how you can help develop these foundational soft skills in your students. Some simple strategies that you can use to help you develop and build these skills. Things that you can integrate into your classrooms, things that you can start doing tomorrow, especially if it's your own kids. All right? So let's go through some strategies, some tips, some ways that you can help develop these workplace skills. Okay, let's start with this number one thing we have to keep in mind. We've got to create awareness. I want you to think in your brains right now. I want you to think of the laziest person you know. Okay? Some of you may be thinking of your spouse. I don't know, right? But whoever that person is. All right? If you were to ask them, how is their work ethic? What do you think they're going to tell you? Oh, it's good, it's great. But you know who isn't? Oh, Josh, he's terrible, right? We hate other people's work ethic, but ours is always fine, right? This was a study that was done, it was really funny. This was with 6,000 young millennial workers. They were interviewed and asked to describe themselves at work. What words do you think would describe you at work? These younger workers were saying, oh, the number one thing that most describes me, I'm hardworking. 86% of them said they were hardworking. 82% of them said that they were loyal to their employer. The one that was lowest, fun-loving, right? Because when I think of young workers, what do I think of? Loyal, hardworking, nose to the grindstone, right? Never take a day off kind of people. Unfortunately, we then asked these same 6,000 millennials bosses the same question about them. Their responses were slightly different. Hardworking down to 11%. Loyal went from 82 to 1. The reality is we oftentimes have a disconnect between our own self-perception and others. So let's do this. In the center of everyone's tables, you'll find there is a little notepad. And what I want everyone to do for an exercise, I'd like everyone to grab and tear off one clean sheet of paper. You will not be getting this paper back, so do not take one that you have already written on, all right? So everybody just needs to get one clean sheet of paper from your table. Okay? Then what I'd like you to do, once you've gotten that clean sheet of paper, I'd like you to draw a big circle in the center of it. Just draw a big circle on the center of that page. Then what I would like you to do is I would like you to look around the room at all of your friends and colleagues who are in here right now. All right. And here's what you're going to do. You are going to rank your work ethic compared to the other people in this room. Okay, but you're going to do this very simply because you're going to have one of three categories to put yourself in. Okay, category number one. If you think you're in the top 25%, so maybe not the best, but you're pretty good, okay? You're going to take that circle, put two eyes, and put a little smiley face. Okay, a smiley face if you think you're in the top 25% of this room. If you are looking around the room and you're like, I'm not the best, but I'm certainly not in that worst category. You're in that middle 50. The middle 50%, two eyes, and a flatline face. If you are just now looking up from your phone going, what are we doing? Two eyes and a frowny face, okay? Or if you just think you're in the bottom 25%. So again, if you look around this room, you think you're in the top quartile of people in this room, you're gonna put two eyes and a smiley face on that piece of paper. If you think you're in the middle 50, two eyes and a flatline face. If you think you're in the bottom 25, two eyes and a frowny face. When you are done, simply fold your piece of paper in half and hold it up for me so that I know you are done. All right, getting close. Some of you are hedging your bets. That's okay. Now, what I would like you to do is I would like you to take that piece of paper for me, and I would like you to trade it with somebody else nearby you. All right, so take a piece of paper, but hold on. Resist the urge to immediately open their piece of paper up and look at it, okay? So just trade it, but don't look at it. Then take that piece of paper you've just traded with somebody, and trade that piece of paper with somebody at a different table from yours. Uh-oh. Then take that piece of paper and trade it with another person at a different table than yours. And then trade that piece of paper with another person from a different table. Once you have traded your piece of paper at least 4 times, do me a favor and sit back down at your table. Now, what we have just done in this room is we have randomized the room. We have taken your piece of paper and scattered it around, so you should have an anonymous person's piece of paper in your hand right now. If, by some dumb stroke of luck, you ended up with your own paper back, don't tell the people around you, hey, I got my paper back, because then they know it's not random, okay? Just pretend. You'd be like, oh, really good, all right? So open up this new random person's piece of paper. It should have a smiley face, a flatline face, or a frowny face. So let's take a look around the room and see how well we've done. So if your piece of paper has a smiley face on it, the one that's in front of you right now, do me a favor and stand up. If you're one of those top 25%, just take a quick look around the room. Does that look, math teachers, does that look like 25%? No, that looks like almost over half the room. Have a seat. So half the room thinks you're in the top 25%. Yeah, that's not possible. All right, let's try the other side. If your piece of paper has a frowny face on it, not flatline, but a frowny face, please stand up. We've got like 3. And before you boo them, remember, it's not their paper. All right, so have a seat. So let me get this straight. So like 200 of you think you're in the top 50, and 3 of you think you're in the bottom 50. Interesting. We just got done making fun of millennials because they're like, they don't know how bad they are. And now we're all God's gift to work ethic. I see how it is. Right? Here's the problem. When it comes to these skills, I don't care how old you are, right? We have a problem because the picture that we see of ourselves in the mirror isn't always the same one that other people see, right? Because we judge our own work ethic based on our intentions. And other people base it on our actions. What we have to do first and foremost for people is help them realize that their intentions may not be what their actions are showing. And that when it comes to work ethic, what matters is not what you intended, but what you deliver. They say when you give presentations, it's important to give quotations from famous people. So since we are in a city of famous poets, of Edgar Allan Poe, I thought I would quote another famous American poet, a gentleman by the name of Ice Cube. And he says this. He says, as a reminder, you had better checkity check yourself before you wreckety wreck yourself. Amen, Cube. Amen. We've got to create that awareness or we will wreck ourselves. Okay, so that's strategy number one. We have to help people realize that disconnect. Strategy number two is about this. We've got to help people discover things on their own. Go back to teenagers, but this applies to all of us, right? We hate it when people tell us things. This is the rule, right? If you tell a teenager a rule, right, aside from not following it, they're going to try and come up with like every excuse possible about why maybe it shouldn't apply, right? Like, you need to be home by 11 o'clock or if not, make a call, right? And what does your teen say? What if I'm on a dark road in the middle of a forest and I get all four flat tires and there's no car nearby and no phone? What can I do then, Mom? Show up at 11. That's what you should do, right? People hate to be told things, but here's the thing. They don't argue with their own facts. When people uncover something themselves, they own it. We have to allow people not to be told what to do, but to discover why it's important. And this applies to just about anything. For me, this is very important. Again, I grew up in a small town in Nebraska. My parents did not have a lot of money, so when I was a kid, we did not go on fancy beach vacations. We went every summer camping in the Black Hills of South Dakota. We did this every single summer except for one. I will remember it vividly. It was 1986, and this year was different. This year, my parents and I did a road trip to Wichita, Kansas, to visit my cousin. Yes, my cousin in Wichita was awesome because he had two things in 1986 which were unbelievable. Number one, he had his own pool. And number two, he had HBO. We spent the whole week swimming and watching movies. It was like nirvana, all right? Except I remember vividly Friday night. Friday night of the trip, they were doing some sort of weird movie marathon, and so we watched Jaws 1, Jaws 2, Jaws 3, and Jaws 4 back to back to back to back. And then my cousin, who was a couple years older than me, was like, hey, let's go swim now. That was a terrible idea. To this day, I am scared to death of sharks. Anybody else here scared of sharks? Okay, when I go to the ocean now, because I now do occasionally go to the ocean, I don't go any deeper than my knee. Okay, I don't swim, I don't surf. There is scary crap out there, okay? Sharks bad. On the other hand, as I'm traveling around, I oftentimes find that I get annoyed by things. Probably the thing that annoys me the most lately are selfie sticks. Anybody else selfie sticks? I was at a conference recently down in San Antonio. Have you ever been to San Antonio? It's a fantastic city. They've got the Riverwalk, really cool, but it's narrow. And I swear, twice, one day, backed up because somebody has a selfie stick trying to take the perfect picture of themselves in a bridge. Just be nice to other people, right? Selfie sticks, annoying. Sharks, deadly though, right? So I was getting ready for going out to a beach vacation that my wife and I were going to take, and I'd been reading about all these shark attacks that have been happening off the coast of North Carolina. So I started to do some research, and I'm like, God, what is with all these shark attacks? People are dying and all this other stuff. So I looked up, and I found a list of worldwide deaths from shark attacks. And what was interesting is it was a graphic listing accidental deaths in the world the last year they had, which was 2015. What do you suppose killed more people in the world in 2015? Sharks or selfies? Yeah, it's not even close. Selfies kill more people by about a 4-to-1 ratio. I was like, oh my goodness. I started doing some more research on this, and here's what I found. The number of selfie deaths just keeps increasing. It's almost 100 people per year die taking selfies. It's gotten so bad in Russia, they have an entire campaign about where not to take selfies. And the crazy part about it is that you know somebody had to die doing every one of them. I started to think more about this, and what I started to realize is that sharks may not be as dangerous as I think. And I started to think back in time, and I remember vividly there was a time I was at a conference in Washington, D.C., and I was at a hotel, and I was walking to the convention center there, and it's like 8 million degrees because it's Washington, D.C., and I'm walking, and I was working on an email, and I remember stopping because I had to use both thumbs. It was like a really important email. And I stopped, and I started typing with both thumbs on my phone, and right as soon as I stopped, a bus whizzes in front of my face, no more than maybe 2 feet. If I hadn't have stopped, I wouldn't be here today. I think of the times when I've had to reach for my phone while I'm driving, or just maybe have to take, and I'm like, a shark's not going to kill me. This is going to kill me. And I decided I needed to pay more attention for my phone. But I had to discover that. Nobody else could tell me. When I discovered it, I now own it, and it becomes part of who I am. We have to allow our students to discover these things on their own. That way they will own it. That's a critical step. Another thing we have to be is be willing to be the change. So do me a favor, can I get everybody to stand up for me? Like, oh goodness, what are we doing now, Josh? You guys have been sitting for too long. You're teachers. I already know this, all right? So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to find a partner, somebody nearby you, all right? So just partner up with somebody who is nearby or around you. And yes, this works best if you were in pairs. What I'd like you to do is turn and face each other. If you do not have a partner, raise your hand right now. If you're partnerless, raise your hand. If you have your hand raised, walk towards somebody else who also has their hand raised. It's like lowtechmatch.com right now. Now, between you and your partner, we're going to have to determine a leader out of the two of you, okay? So this is going to be very simple. The leader is going to be the shortest person out of the two of you. Okay? Really easy. All right, so shorter people, here's what you're going to do. You are leaders. I'd like you to turn and face the other person, get a little bend in your knee, put your hands out in front of you as if you were going to play patty cake. But again, we're a professional development conference, so please do not actually play patty cake, all right? Also, some people are germaphobes, so do not touch your hands to their hands, all right? There's not enough Purell in here. Okay, now, when I say go, leaders, what you're going to do is you're going to move your arms and your hands anywhere you want to in front of your body, okay? If you are not the leader, you're the taller person, you are the follower. Your job is to be the best human mirror you can be and follow everything that they do, all right? So here we go, shorter people, on your mark. Get set. Let's go. Oh, awesome. And stop. Woo. All right, shake it out for me real quick. Awesome. That was great. All right. Now, fair is fair. So we're going to do this a second time. But we're going to switch roles, all right? So taller people, you're now the leader. Shorter people, shoe is on the other foot, you're the follower. Let's see how you do. All right, so here we go. On your mark, get set, go. And stop. Awesome. All right, do me a favor. Give your partner some love, a fist bump, a high five, a hug, whatever you think feels appropriate. Oh, that's awesome. Have a seat. I love getting a chance to watch an audience do this. I've had the pleasure and the honor of getting a chance to do training and development and teaching for over 20 years. I've done some variation of this for a lot of this. I've done this with audiences from around the country. I've done this with audiences around the globe. I did this with a group of 10-year-olds in the Middle East. We translated it into Arabic. I was like, let's see what we can do. They did the same thing. I've done this with HR professionals from across Southeast Asia in English, which is none of their native languages. They do the same thing y'all do. Because what this proves more than anything else is about human behavior, not about the culture that you come from. Because here's what I see happen almost every time. The first leader goes, right? And the first leader has free will. You can do whatever you want to do. It doesn't matter. But you tend to fall into one of two camps. You're somewhere on the easy side of the spectrum, or you're in the hard side of the spectrum, right? What does the easy side of the spectrum look like? Right? I've seen people give their partner instructions, right? Right hand out. Stop. Bring it back. Good, right? That's the easy side of the spectrum. On the other hand, some people choose to be more on the hard side of the spectrum. What does the hard side of the spectrum look like? Right? Some of you right now are looking at your partner, giving them the dagger eyes. I see. Now that's all well and good. But what I find is really interesting is what happens the second time. The second leader gets a chance to go, and they have free will. But what I see happen 99% of the time is this. If the first leader started in the easy spectrum, the second leader tends to stay in the easy spectrum. Now, things may get a little more complicated. Right? They may bust out their inner Mr. Miyagi, right? Wax on, wax off. Right? But they rarely get out of control. On the other hand, if the first leader was in the hard spectrum, what happens the second time? Game on, girl, right? Like, start doing dance moves, little matrix action, right? People go crazy. Why is that important? Because the basics are this. Subconsciously, without realizing it, we model the behavior of the people around us. We didn't even think about it. And it doesn't matter by culture, it doesn't matter by language. We are just humans, and that's what we do. What's one of the best ways that we can help develop work ethic behaviors in our students? Is to model the behavior we're looking for. And to create schools and organizations that do the same. At a separate one of our career centers that we work with in Ohio, they implemented a curriculum school-wide, not just in their CTE programs. And what they found is when they did that, it had a 40% drop in disciplinary action in their schools. Because people were modeling the behavior, not just in the workplace, but there in school as well. Right, we see significant things happen when you become the change. That's a really powerful thing to remember. But it's also important that your school becomes the change. If your students are learning it in one classroom and they see other administrators or teachers not modeling it, you can undermine things just as quickly. So next, don't rely on posters. I know this is heartfelt, okay? I know it's difficult as instructors. I know many of you have looked around this room already and been like, oh my God, do you know how many posters I could get up on the walls in here? This room would be amazing. Here's the problem. We love posters because they help reinforce, but oftentimes we use posters around these soft skills, but we don't talk about them. We just put them up because we don't think we should have to talk about them. All right? And don't worry, I talked about this with educators all the time, but corporate America, where I used to be, is no different. HR professionals really are just, unfortunately, unskilled teachers. That's what most HR people are, right? We try and teach, but we don't have any actual methodology, right? And so what we do is we put up a lot of posters, oftentimes around vision, mission, values. We don't want to talk about it, so we just put it up. There's a great company down in Houston, Texas. Woo! Fortune 50, amazing company, does lots of great things. 4 core values. Number 1 core value is integrity. It's the heart of everything they do. They make people sign documents around integrity. They put it on glass cubes. They put it on the coffee mugs. In fact, the headquarters it's a 3-story atrium in the headquarters. There's a 2-story banner with the company on it, and it's got all 4 core values, including integrity, number 1. Okay, I should really probably be using the past tense, because in 2001, when the FBI and the feds came into Enron's world headquarters, they were greeted with this 2-story banner before they arrested the CEO and the executives for the largest insider trader scandal ever. You can put words up on a poster. It's not going to change anything. Right? You go into workforce centers, you'll see posters like this all the time, right? Here's what you don't wear to an interview. Right? But we don't ever talk about these things. The reality is this: you have to have conversation. Posters don't change behaviors. If you go into any restroom anywhere in America in public, you'll see a sign that says what? Employees must wash hands before they return. I'm going to ask you this question. The employees who are not washing their hands, do you think they just forgot? Like, oh, I knew I was going to do something before I went back to work. What was it? No, they're just not washing their hands, right? How many of you have a shared fridge, right, in like the teacher lounge or wherever, right? Yeah. And you have to put the sign in the shared fridge, right? Please don't eat food that isn't yours. Because somebody's stealing food. And here's the funny part. We all know the person who's stealing food, right? We just don't want to confront Josh about it because that's not my job, right? I was talking about this the other day. Somebody sent me this e-card that I thought was hilarious. Strange new trend emerging at the office. People putting names on food in the company fridge. Today I ate a tuna sandwich named Kevin. We can put signs on everything. We can put posters up everywhere. But we have to have the difficult conversations. We have to talk to people about these things. Yes, a daily shower is important when you're working. No, what you wear to the club is not appropriate to wear to the interview. Yes, 8 means 8. We have to have those conversations because posters alone won't do anything. The next thing that's going to be really important is about what we call the 1% approach. I'm a runner. Anybody out in the room a crazy runner like me? Anyone else? Okay, one kind of hand in the back of the room. The rest of you are like, run? Is someone chasing me? Right? Okay, so I've had the pleasure of doing lots of different races. I will tell you, runners are crazy. Here's why. I got up this morning early so I could bust out a 5K this morning. How far is a 5K? 3.1. I'm not doing that extra 0.1, just only 3.1 miles. All right? That's my idea of a fun morning. All right? I've had the opportunity in my life to do 2 marathons. A marathon is 26.2 miles. And an unbelievable experience. Crazy. Well, my brother, who's not a runner, wanted to do it. It was like one of his bucket list items. So we went online, looked for a quick little thing, and found a 16-week training program that could take anybody and get them to finish a marathon. He was like, well, let's try this. Did a 16-week training program, and sure enough, he finished the Kansas City Marathon. He will never do another one, but he checked it off his bucket list. So let me ask you in this room right here, how many of you want to check an item off your bucket list and in 16 weeks from right now, join me in running a marathon? I've got one, okay? I've got several, not just no's, but hell no's. Okay, that's fine. So let me change the equation. How about we switch it to just a 5K? How many of you would be willing to train for 16 weeks to finish a 5K with me? Okay, we've got a good number of more folks who are interested. And again, a few of you are still not interested whatsoever. What's the difference between a marathon and 5K? Sure, is that like about 23 miles, Josh? That's about how far, right? Okay, it seems more realistic, right? Here's the thing. Our human brain is wired that if something is super difficult, we're most likely not even going to try and start. Here's the problem when we create awareness. When people start to realize that they're not as good at something as they thought, what's our natural human behavior? To quit. Most college students drop out of a class when 2 events happen. Number 1, they get the syllabus. Number 2, when they take the first test, right? The reality is when we're confronted with that, people don't want to change. So we say this, you don't have to become a superhero overnight, but here's what we want you to do. We want you to become 1% better. Can you become 1% better every day? Small, incremental changes. Can you have a 1% better attendance? Let's just say you've got somebody who is chronically late. And you're like, Josh, I need you to stop being 20 minutes late. I'm like, I'll try. Okay, but what if you said this? Hey, Josh, do you suppose tomorrow you could just be 19 minutes late? Do you think I might only be 19 minutes late? I might even be 18, right? Some of you are like, you'll still be 20 minutes late. Hey, but I may be 20 minutes, but I have a much better chance of only being 19 minutes late than I do of being on time. How about next week we make it 15? And we start these small, incremental changes. People, when they're confronted with small achievements, not only can they make small things happen, but they get the success of making something positive happen. And here's the crazy part. If you improve a skill by 1% every day for 40 days, how much better do you get? You would think 40, but the math instructors in the room will tell you differently. The power of compound interest, the same thing that makes your credit cards impossible to pay off, actually causes a different curve to happen. And what you'll see happens instead is you actually end up at 120% better. Because compound interest makes the 1% of 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 the 1% that much better. And here's the crazy part. When it comes to human behavior, even a 1% change can sometimes make a huge impact. English teachers in the room, you know this is true, right? Right? What do I mean? You could take somebody who's completely normal, right? Person who's loved their kids, they love to cook, they love animals, right? Just a completely normal, well-adjusted person. What's a 1% change to that? Get rid of the commas. Now what happens? I'm going to prison for eating and cooking my own children, right? Small changes can sometimes have a huge impact. So that's why the 1% approach is a great way to help people change their behavior. All right, next, let's stop making some assumptions. So do me a favor. Everybody grab a piece of paper. It could be the same one that has the smiley face on it, because Lord knows most of you have a smiley face. Or you can get a brand new blank one. It doesn't matter to me. But what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take that piece of paper, hold it over your table, and then what I'd like you to do is you've got it here in both hands, hold it over the table. I would like you to close your eyes for me. Okay? Don't worry, we have security in the back of the room. No one will steal your luggage there in the back. You're fine. You're fine. Right? So you're holding it up here, and what I'd like you to do is this. Just follow my instructions and keep your eyes closed the whole time. Okay? So take that piece of paper you've got in your hands right now and fold it in half. Now take that and fold it in half again. Then what I would like you to do is tear off the upper right-hand corner of that piece of paper. You just drop it on the table there in front of you. Don't worry, it's the last event of the day. Then take that piece of paper, unfold it one fold. Fold it in the opposite direction. And then tear off the upper right-hand corner again. Now take that and fold it the direction you haven't folded it yet. And then it should be very easy. You're going to tear off the corner that is then closest to you. Once you've done that, unfold your piece of paper all the way. Hold it up high above your head. And then open your eyes. Let's take a look around. Let's see how we did. This did not go quite as well as I'd hoped. All right, I'm looking around the room. I got all sorts of things. I've got sort of like a castle on the hill over here. Got, I think, a space invader, some big teeth coming out of the bottom of that one. You've got a crown here. You ended up with 3 holes in the center of yours. I'm not sure how that happened. Some 3-hole people over here. You've got a New Orleans mask already. The kiss me lips over here. One single hole? I don't even know how that's possible. All right. How did you all end up with such different outcomes? I gave you all the same input. I told you all the same simple instructions. What went wrong? Your perspectives are different, but these are simple. I'm not talking high-level stuff. This is fold and tear, okay? This is kindergarten level stuff. So what went wrong? So you're trying to tell me that it's my fault that you screwed up? Yes, right? When everybody screws up, it's obviously the teacher's fault, right? Well, the problem is this. I made assumptions. I assumed everybody would know what to do. I assumed it was simple. And we do the same thing often with soft skills, and that's why soft skills get such a bad reputation, because we don't clearly define them. We just say things like, hey, I need you to have a better attitude. Well, how do you know I don't have a good attitude? Like, what? I think I've got a pretty good, right? We don't clearly define things. We make assumptions. So what we have to do when talking about soft skills is we have to make them as explicit as a technical skill. When we talk about attitude, for instance, when we talk about it, we define it this way. We say, attitude is staying positive in every situation. Take control of the way you react. How do I know you have a more positive attitude? Because you don't let a bad moment cascade into a bad day. That's taking control. When you clearly define things, you make sure that they're observable, they're measurable, they're coachable, and that's when you can start to create change. If you'd like to have concrete definitions of each and every one of our 7 A's, you can find them. If you'd like to get free work ethic tips to help you explain these behaviors, go to workethic.org. We've got free resources for you to take advantage of. It's just a great place to get yourself started with what we do. So let's do this now. Can I get everybody to stand up again? Because I know it's been almost 10 minutes since you stood up. I would like everyone to face front here. And what I want you to do, I want you to get your feet set in the ground, put your arms straight out in front of you. All right. Now, does everybody know your left from your right? Just remember L, left. We're going to go this way, okay? So here's what we do. When I say go, keep your feet on the ground. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to twist your body using your arms as a pointer, okay? And you're going to twist just your upper body using your arms as a pointer, and you're going to twist to the left as far as you can go. As I just learned from my exercise from my friend in the back, I want to be as explicit as possible. So let me repeat this again. How far are you going to go? You're going to go as far as you can go. So let's all say that together. How far are you going to go? As far as you can go. Okay, good. All right. So our arms out in front. Here we go. On the count of 3, we're going to go to the left as far as we can go. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Let's go. And back. Whew. All right, shake it out a little bit. All right, great. Feeling good about this. Now, the other thing we learned this morning is that incremental change is the way to go, right? The 1% approach. So what I'm going to say is this. Let's try this again. I want to practice what we just preached. So you all remember where you just went to. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Put your arms out in front of you. And this time when I say go, we're going to go to the left. I want you to go 1 inch further than where you just got to. Okay, so 1 inch. All right, so here we go. On your mark, get set, let's go. Let's see if we can get 1 inch further and back. Awesome. All right, how many of you were able to go 1 inch further the second time? Almost everybody. Have a seat. I thought we'd built up some real trust and rapport here. Y'all just lied straight up to my face. Okay, let me just review here. How far were you supposed to go the first time? As far as you could go. And yet then magically, almost everyone was able to go 1 inch further than the furthest they could go. Why were you able to go further the second time? I asked to. We set goals. I stretched. Right? Lots of different reasons. Did you go as far as you could go the first time? Obviously not. No, you went until you got uncomfortable. That's when most people stop. Here's our challenge. If we're going to teach people work ethic, they're going to have to get uncomfortable. They're going to have to do things they don't want to do. They may have to wear a uniform at work they don't like. They may have to treat customers nice even if the customers are a-holes. They're going to have to sometimes be uncomfortable because that's where the growth happens. To steal a phrase from the U.S. Marine Corps, you've got to get comfortable getting uncomfortable. There's a lot of different techniques and strategies you can use to develop work ethic. There's a lot of different ways that you can do it, but know this. These soft skills are critical to the success of our students, both academically and then in their careers. And the sooner we start to develop them, reinforce them, and coach on them, the more effective we can be. Soft skills aren't just a nice to have. As we enter the 21st century, what we know is they are a must-have. Today, you learned a little bit about how you can integrate them into your classrooms. You don't have to teach a separate class in work ethic or soft skills. You can develop these behaviors, and regardless of whether or not it's academic or technical curriculum. But you have to start to do it. So with that in mind, can I get everybody to take your right hand and raise it above your head? All right, everybody, do me a favor, wiggle your fingers for me. All right, now take your arms, take it to the left, to the right, to the left, to the right. I've always wanted to do that. It's like a really cool thing. Okay, now do it. Now take your arm, pick a little O with your hands. Show that O off to everybody else because they are oh so awesome. All right, now then take that O for me and put it on your chin. All right, now just take a quick look around the room and see how many people have their hand on their cheek and not on their chin. By the way, those of you in the back, don't think I didn't conceive this move. Why did so many of you put your hand on your cheek instead of on your chin? Because I did. So I may be doing this as the closing for me, but let me do this as the closing for this entire conference. Here's what I'm going to tell you. If you have spent a week in Baltimore learning, networking, finding best practices, and you go back and you talk about everything that you did, but you don't change at all, you've wasted your time. It's not good enough to talk about something. You've got to put your hand where you say it's going to be. If you're going to change your behavior, if you're going to change what you do, if you're going to become more effective, if you're going to improve the outcomes for your students, you can't just talk. You've got to match your words with your actions. The second thing it's proven to me is that obviously after a week in Baltimore and an hour of me, you are not listening to anything else anyone else says. So thank you very much for your time. It's been a great conference. Thank you for letting me be a part of it.